you remember when the Niners wanted Josh McDaniels? Sometimes Garth Brooks has a great song called, I think it's called Unanswered Prayers. Some of God's greatest gifts are unanswered prayers. The Niners wanted Josh McDaniels. Big time Josh McDaniels. Super Bowl winning Josh McDaniels. Tom Brady tutored Josh McDaniels. The first non-interim coach in the Super Bowl era to be fired by 2 franchises before the end of his second season with each. Josh McDaniels left the Colts plane flying back to Indy empty. Josh McDaniels. For all your complaints and mine and others, there are things to nitpick with Kyle Shanahan. He's not Josh McDaniels, and the Niners wanted Josh McDaniels. Here's the good news on Josh McDaniels. If the Niners had hired Josh McDaniels, he'd be gone by now. So there's that. What a disaster. What an absolute, unequivocal disaster. But much like Garth Brooks, some of the guy's greatest gifts are unanswered prayers. Josh failing might finally line it up for Mark Davis and Jim Harbaugh. There was a report the other day that Michigan took a massive contract extension off the table for Jim. That report's been refuted. Michigan president and athletics director and regents are currently working to finalize Harbaugh's contract, which will make him the highest paid coach in the Big Ten. So Mark Davis may need to act. Maybe that precipitated the trade. This was Monday night in bed, late, almost 10 p.m. That's late for me. Middlekoff sent me a text. He's like, I was doing my last scroll, or maybe he tweeted that. Anyway, he texted me the story. They did it. They fired those two. Not just the head coach. They fired the GM and the OC. Michael Lombardi's son, out. Dave Ziegler, out. Josh McDaniels with 4 years on his contract left, out. I remember last year, Plaschke said that the Raiders didn't have the money last year to fire the head coach and the GM if they wanted to. Well, they found the money. Monday night at 10 p.m., were they? It makes you think they must have been arguing all day long. Or maybe the other alternative, that was my first thought, was were they just arguing all day long? Then maybe this Jim Harbaugh thing breaks in the middle of the day. Maybe Mark Davis looks in on it. He goes, I got to get Jim. Jim wants to get back to the NFL. This has been the most obvious destination. He worked for the Raiders. He and David Shaw worked for the Raiders, but he worked for the Raiders. They were connected kind of a couple coaching searches ago. And or maybe 3 coaching. I don't remember how many coaching searches ago, but they've had a lot of coaching searches. I remember this quote that Jim Harbaugh gave Tim Kawakami about what happened this day. I remember being at this game. Very frustrating day for Colin Kaepernick. Derek Carr played well. Niners lost to the Raiders. And Davis was asked by Kawakami what they talked about before the game. And what Jim said was or he talked to Mark Davis. Mark Davis said, "You stole our dysfunction. That's supposed to be our thing." So with Jim's new contract extension on the verge, maybe if John Gruden's allowed back in the NFL, maybe he can go back to John Gruden. I mean, he's already had a contract done with him, so you can go back to John Gruden. But sad day. No, you know what? Happy day in this Raider organization. We, Raider Nation, deserve better. We, Raider Nation, definitely deserve better than Josh McDaniels. Somehow the coaches have gotten worse. Worse. Dennis Allen's off there having success even. But Del Rio, turns out, wasn't the worst. John Gruden, it wasn't going well, but it was better than this. And Mark Davis had enough. I'm just glad he's got the stadium money. All those Jets people buying tickets for the next game on Sunday Night Football. Sunday Night Football. Maybe that was part of it. He's like, I can't do this on Sunday Night Football. National television again. Wow. They made Antonio Pierce the interim head coach. So all's well. Antonio only got run out of town the last place he was, albeit college football, where the rules are, they have a lot of rules in college football. And he broke a lot of the rules in college football. You may not have noticed because Arizona State has 2 wins. but they're not allowed to go to the postseason this year because of what happened largely under the watch of Antonio Pierce while he was at Arizona State. I mean, Herm Edwards was the head coach, so him too. But Antonio Pierce takes over. Going to be a lot of good coaching. It's going to be an interesting offseason for the Raiders. I saw somebody mention Lions OC. Yep, good candidate. Be some good candidates out there. And obviously you want to take that job because it's a head coaching job. The other thing, not only did the Niners dodge Josh McDaniels, and we talked about this on the podcast a little bit. How about the way that Jimmy Garoppolo has looked? That's your handpicked guy in a must-win season. Him and Brian Hoyer, utter disaster. Utter disaster. So the more things change, the more they stay the same. But we as a nation will stand strong. We as a nation will persevere. We as a nation will stand together. And there's only one man that can save the nation now, and that's Jimmy Harbaugh. And you might think, Guy, this is just a Raider guy character that you have. No, I believe it. The only man that can save the Raiders now is the force of nature that is Jim Harbaugh. It's 100% true. Coming in to just coach football, not going to get it done. You need a force of nature. When Jim Harbaugh took over at Stanford, now Stanford's had some ups and downs over the years. They were up before, they were down before. But when he took over at Stanford, he did something. Now, but they wanted him gone the second he was gone. They couldn't be happier that he left, and it worked out for a period. But he changed a lot of things at Stanford, like finally finding a way to work with the institution on just to some degree getting some football players that might otherwise not get into school to some like a very little degree. But he found a way to work with the administration. He changed Stanford. Very hard place to change. The Niners were a mess when he took them over. A mess. He changed them immediately. Not kinda, like from mess to Super Bowl contender. Immediately. Michigan. I'd been to 2 Michigan games pre-Harbaugh. I remember being at a Michigan game, like right before Harbaugh. I remember being in a Michigan game against Utah. They were playing Utah. They were getting their butts kicked. This is just before Harbaugh got there. There was I was working for Pac-12 Network there. There was a lightning delay. So they had to clear the stadium. So I end up in an elevator going down. And from the suite level, an older woman gets in with like a walker and like her son-in-law and her daughter holding her up. Nobody's really talking. And she's just looking at the ground, shaking her head. Everyone's kind of wet. And she goes, "What's happened to my Michigan Wolverines?" Just to nobody in particular, in a quiet, depressed elevator. And then Harbaugh showed up and changed everything. Now, I don't think he's winning the championship. I don't think he's winning the championship there. But he's changing everything. So there's only one answer to this. It's not Gruden. It's not Ben Johnson. It's not any number of guys. It's Jim Harbaugh. That is the only answer. Mark Davis has no choice but to fire Josh McDaniels on Halloween and try to get Harbs. Can he get Harbs to leave during the season? Can he get him to promise? That's the tough part. It's like you can say, yeah, we'll have a deal. Then Jim goes to the college football playoff. They put a big contract in front of him. But I think he wants to come back to the NFL. I think he wants to win a Super Bowl. And I think it's happening.